Leader is different than a servant leader. Again, a steward leader plays an active role in helping others thrive and succeed, and they exemplify a standard of how to succeed and deal with challenges. They encourage and coach others while also modeling that standard to others. They practice what they preach. But isn't that what this business is all about? You set goals, you don't quit, you set out to finish what you start, and during that process, you try to help others succeed. Many years ago, when we lived in Boise, Idaho, after, Boise fans! I learned of a half marathon race. It's called the Race to Roby Creek. It's a 13.1 mile race, and it is a race that goes straight up a summit, hence the logo. It goes straight up a summit, and then it goes straight down. And it's kind of got the reputation, it's considered to be one of the toughest races in the whole Northwest. I didn't really know at the time of its reputation, so when a friend of mine had an extra ticket the last minute, and 2 days before the race, she asked me if I wanted to do the race with her. I naively agreed and planned to show up to that race without having trained at all. I can remember the night before the race, I was talking with my father on the phone, and I just kind of mentioned, yeah, tomorrow I'm gonna do the Race to Roby Creek, and I'm gonna run the whole thing. And my dad said, Melanie, are you crazy? Have you been training for this race? My dad's a runner, he knows you have to train for these things. And he knows how important it is to make sure that you're prepared. Clearly, I was probably a little ignorant and maybe a little arrogant. But when I got up the next morning, I showed up to do that race, and I was determined, I was stubborn, I was gonna run it. So the morning of that race, I was actually wishing that I hadn't called my dad the night before, because I was suddenly really nervous. And before talking to him, I wasn't nervous at all. In some instances, I think ignorance can be bliss. But regardless, I showed up to do that race that morning. It was off to a good start. Miles 1 through 4, they're on just a slight upward slope. And then miles 5 through 8 are literally straight up a very steep hill, and then down. Miles 9 through 12 are straight down. So in the last mile and a half are on a flat terrain to the finish line. I was determined to run that race and not walk it. I've never been one to do anything halfway. I think I get it from my dad, actually. It had more to do with me being headstrong and stubborn and just my determined personality. If I was going to do that race, I certainly was not going to walk it. I was going to finish it. And at the beginning of the race, everyone had set their own personal goals, and some set out just to finish it, regardless of their pace. And some walked the entire race. The important thing was just to finish it. My goal was to start and finish that race and run it, all 13.1 miles. So at about mile 3, I remember thinking to myself, this is nothing. I'm gonna be able to finish this no problem. And then about mile 4, where the pavement ends and a dirt road began, which was about the same point where the climb really steepens. Miles 5 through 6 were really rough. They were really hard. And this is the point in the race where I wanted to stop running. And I was thinking to myself, okay, what was I thinking? This is not fun. I looked around and I saw several people sitting down on the path, and they were kind of out of breath. And a few people were actually seeking medical attention from the first aid station there. And I later had heard after the race that someone actually had to be life flighted out, but I wasn't aware at the time. I knew that I had at least another 2 miles until I reached the summit. But all of a sudden it just kind of hit me. I didn't think I was going to be able to make it. 2 miles to get to the summit doesn't sound like it's very long, but at this point it was grueling, it was hard, and I wanted to stop. I was really starting to doubt myself, and my calves were burning from the climbing. But I knew that if I stopped to walk, my legs would cramp up and I probably wouldn't be able to finish. So I just kept running. By the time I hit mile 7, the terrain and the pain in my calves were brutal. This is where the training would have come in handy, I'm pretty sure. My legs were on fire. And I still had another mile plus to go before I reached the summit. And I was pretty sure I was not going to make it. It was at the point in this race where I looked up ahead of the trail and I could see my dad. He had come to cheer me on.
Wow.
He had strategically placed himself on the hardest part of the race where he knew I would be likely to be tempted to quit. I could hear his words. He said, "Melanie, you got this. Keep going. Focus on the finish line." It was exactly what I needed to keep going at exactly the right place, at exactly the right time. So miles 7.5 to miles 8, they were so steep, and almost all of the race participants that were previously running had all turned into slow walkers at this point. I kept going, I kept running, because I knew that I was probably still in my dad's peripheral. And I could actually, very faintly, I could hear him still cheering me on. And by this time, I could see the summit. So there was no way I was going to stop or slow down at this point. Finally, I had reached the top, and I kind of naively assumed that the worst part was over. Miles 9 and 10 were straight downhill, which you would think would be a relief after the prior 8 miles. By this time, the muscle cramping, the toe jamming, and the bone-jarring downhill was almost too much to bear. I could feel the blisters forming on my feet, but it was so steep that I didn't think I could even slow down if I wanted to. The downward momentum was almost unbearable, and my quads and my knees were hurting. By the time I hit mile 11, I was in so much pain that it really became a mental race at this point, and it really didn't become a physical race any longer. Was I going to quit at the next station, or was I going to finish? I can remember having a discussion, an internal debate with myself on the path. I still had 2.5 miles left. It seemed like an eternity. The blisters, I could tell my whole bottom of my feet were blisters, and my legs were cramping. I wanted to quit. For those who have ever run a marathon, or even a half marathon, know that those last few miles, that's the hardest part. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. It really comes down to will and determination and training, if you've done that part of it. And all the supporters and everyone who comes to watch the race and cheer their loved ones on, they usually put themselves at the very end of the race, about a quarter mile to the end, so they can cheer them on. But there I was barely reaching mile 11, which by this, you're thinking it's mile 11, it's just another 2.5 miles. I was exhausted. I was hurting, and I was trying to stay mentally strong. And then there again was my dad. He had driven to the end of the race, and he walked 2.5 miles up the path to encourage me to finish that race. There he was about mile 10 or 11, And I will never forget his words to me. All he said was, "Melanie, you finish strong. Finish strong." I've thought of this experience many times in my life. Throughout my life, as I faced challenges and struggles, and I've prayed for strength, sometimes pleading to my Heavenly Father. During difficult times, asking for comfort and strength or relief. And in my mind's eye, I can hear my Heavenly Father saying those same words to me. "Melanie, you finish strong. Finish strong." So as I stand here on this stage, I want to give you those same words of wisdom and encouragement to you. No matter what you start, finish strong, finish strong. We are all on this unique journey together. We're all on different parts of the trail, and we're all going at a different pace. Some of us are running, and some of us are walking. Some of us are struggling to finish, and some of us are just barely getting started. Perhaps some of us are a little naive, and they don't know what the heck they're doing. Look for opportunities to cheer others on in their race. Look for opportunities to be an example. You can't run someone else's race for them. Everyone has to run or walk their own race. But you can certainly cheer them along the way. Be just like my dad on the hard parts of the trail, encouraging others to finish strong. Finish strong. My dad knew that he couldn't run that last part of the race for me, but somehow me knowing that I wasn't alone and that he understood my challenges, it gave me strength and courage and determination beyond my own. Now, before I share with you what my second wish for you is, I want to make sure that everyone knows who my sister Sharon